Sangamon State's temporary campus wasn't looking very temporary in 1975, as construction was underway on the university's first permanent building, Perkins Library.
I think one of the proudest moments, those of us who'd been here from the beginning, was the opening of Perkins Library in 1975. That proved that we were going to be a permanent campus and that the state was really making an investment in our vision of what we were doing.
True to our president's vision, the library was designed to be the very center of campus and intellectual life.
The public affairs mission of the university was bolstered when the first edition of Illinois Issues magazine was published in 1975. The magazine focused on political reporting from the state capitol.
It was started by Paul Simon, Sam Gove, and Sam Whitwer. Those are the three guys who got together and says, we need a magazine that looks in depth at Illinois government. And of course, Paul was on this campus at the time, and so they started it at Sangamon State University, interestingly in cooperation with the University of Illinois.
SSU's national public radio station, WSSR, went on the air shortly after in January.
The legislature designated Sangamon State University when it was created in 1970 as the state's public affairs institution. And Dr. Spencer saw establishment of a non-commercial public radio station as a natural extension of that mandate, and saw that a public radio station could really become an important tool of that mandate.
What we had to do was to win over the rest of Springfield, and I think with our excellent public relations arm with the WUIS, with the radio station, with Illinois Issues magazine, I think we slowly began to show that we were worth the investment of the state's resources.
The campus culture continued to grow as the Prairie Stars men's soccer team played their first game in 1977. A women's tennis team took the courts only 2 years later. The campus looked to the stars in the late 70s as the observatory on top of Perkins Library was dedicated.
Perkins Library was finished in 1976, and while it was still in the latter stages of construction, we moved the telescope up here on the roof.
At the time, the telescope was one of very few in the world that was accessible to people with disabilities.
I got the bright idea back in 1956 when I was an undergraduate. I worked on a telescope in Vermont, Springfield, Vermont, that had a fixed focal point. It was designed and built in 1927, and I thought if we could duplicate that kind of telescope where the eyepiece would be fixed, anybody who was using a wheelchair could come up to it. No matter where the telescope was pointing then, they could look at whatever objects they wanted to see.
Schweighauser went on to start a popular event on campus called Star Parties in 1977. Members of the Springfield community were invited to campus to use the telescope and learn.
As they became more known in the community and so forth, why the attendance increased until we were averaging in the late 70s and through the 80s and into the 90s, we were averaging about 250 people on a Friday night.
SSU's first major change in leadership occurred in 1978, as Dr. Spencer announced he would resign and return to the faculty.
Spencer's leaving in the first place was painful. He was the father of the university.
Later that year, Dr. Alex Lacey became SSU's second president. In one of his first public statements, Lacey noted that one of his top priorities would be to consolidate the university's gains and improve programs.
Alex was a different type of leadership. Where Spencer came from New England, Alex was an Arkansas person. The style of leadership was different. He came in at a very difficult time for the university, having lost our first president.
He brought a new view, a far different view of higher education from that which our founding president, Bob Spencer, had. Bob was much more of a teacher scholar, a practitioner scholar.
Lacey saw institutions like Sangamon State setting the trend for the future of higher education. His vision would soon become clear.